The sirens were still echoing when I pulled into my driveway. Step out of the vehicle. Not one officer. Two. And she was already pointing at me like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. That's him, Linda Whitmore said, voice sharp and steady. He's been violating HOA rules for weeks. Arrest him. In my own driveway. With the whole street watching. I hadn't even turned off the engine yet. It ticked under the hood, heat rising into the afternoon air, the smell of burnt oil hanging heavy around me. And she was smiling. That was the part that didn't fit. Not angry. Not frustrated. Smiling. Like she'd already won. I pushed the door open slowly. Gravel crunched under my boots, louder than it should have been. The officer stepped forward, one hand resting near his belt, already treating me like I'd done something worse than parking on my own property. Behind him, a second cruiser rolled in. Slow. Deliberate. 2 cars. For a parking violation. Yeah, something wasn't adding up. Linda took a step closer, heels clicking against the concrete like she owned the ground I was standing on. Her perfume hit before her words did. Sweet. Sharp. Too strong for a Tuesday afternoon. Sir, we received a complaint, the officer said. Calm, but already leaning toward her side. Of course he was. She had that look. Perfect hair. Perfect posture. Clipboard tucked under her arm like it was a badge. I glanced past them. Curtains shifting all along the street. Neighbors watching. Waiting. No one stepping outside. Not yet. That silence stretched. Heavy. Rehearsed. Go ahead, Linda said, folding her arms. Tell them why you think the rules don't apply to you. I wiped my hands on the rag from the passenger seat. Grease smeared across my fingers again. Didn't matter how many times you cleaned it, it never really came off. What exactly is the issue? I asked. The officer didn't answer. He looked at her. Not me. That told me everything. She stepped closer. Just enough to invade space. Not enough to look aggressive. Unapproved modifications. Commercial activity. Noise violations, she said, like she'd practiced it. She probably had. And refusal to comply after multiple notices. Notices. I hadn't seen a single one. But she said it like the paperwork already existed. Like this moment was just the final step. Like I was already guilty. The second. Officer leaned against the cruiser, watching. Not bored. Not relaxed. Waiting. Like he expected this to escalate. Linda tilted her head, studying me. Then she said it. Soft. But loud enough for everyone to hear. People like you move in, and suddenly the whole neighborhood starts slipping. A couple curtains snapped shut. Others stayed open. No one said a word. But you could feel it. The judgment. The weight of it. Not just her. The whole street. The officer shifted his stance. Pen ready. Sir, we're going to need you to step away from the vehicle. That was fast. Too fast. I hadn't raised my voice. Hadn't argued. But the decision was already made. Linda's smile widened just a fraction. There it was again. That same look. Like she knew something I didn't. Like this wasn't just about a driveway. I glanced down at my phone in the cup holder. Screen dark. Silent. For now. Then I looked back at her. She didn't break eye contact. Not once. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about rules. This wasn't about the HOA. She wasn't trying to enforce anything. She was trying to prove something. And she thought calling the police on me, in my own driveway, was going to be her win. What she didn't know? I run the company her husband works for. The officer's hand hovered just a little closer to his belt as I stepped back from the car, slow and deliberate, like I had nothing to hide and nothing to prove. The engine ticked behind me, heat rising in waves that distorted the air above the hood. I could smell the oil again, sharp and familiar, grounding in a moment that was starting to tilt sideways. Linda did not move. She just watched. That same smile, steady and practiced, like she had rehearsed this scene in her head more than once. Step over here, please, the officer said, gesturing toward the edge of the driveway. Not asking. Directing. I walked where he pointed. Gravel shifted under my boots. Small, uneven crunches that sounded louder than they should have. The second officer straightened up from the cruiser. His eyes stayed on me, but his body stayed relaxed. Waiting again. Always waiting. That felt planned. Do you have identification on you? The first officer asked. I nodded and reached slowly into my back pocket. No sudden moves. No surprises. The leather of my wallet felt worn, edges softened from years of use. I handed it over. He flipped it open, glanced down, then back at me. His expression did not change, but something in his posture tightened just a fraction. It was quick. Easy to miss. But it was there. Linda noticed it too. Her head tilted slightly. Curious. Like she was trying to read a page she could not quite see. He has been running some kind of operation out of that garage, she said, stepping closer again. Tools, equipment, noise at all hours. This is a residential community. Her voice carried just enough to reach the open windows around us. I could feel eyes again. More this time. People shifting, leaning, trying to catch every word. I work on my own property, I said, keeping my voice even. No edge. No push. The officer held up a hand, not to stop me, but to pause the exchange. He looked back down at my identification. Longer this time. His thumb traced the edge of the card like he was checking something twice. Or maybe remembering something. That hesitation spread. Small, but real. Linda's smile flickered. Just for a second. Then it came back, sharper. He is refusing to comply, she added quickly. I have sent multiple notices. There it was again. That word. Notices. She kept repeating it like saying it enough times would make it true. The officer closed the wallet and handed it back. His fingers brushed mine for half a second. Firm. Intentional. Sir, have you received any official communication from the Homeowners Association? He asked. The tone had shifted. Slightly. But enough. I shook my head. No, sir. Simple. Direct. The air changed again. Not dramatic. Just a subtle shift, like a door opening somewhere out of sight. The second officer pushed off the cruiser now, walking a few steps closer. Not rushing. Not intervening. Just closing distance. Linda crossed her arms tighter. Her nails tapped against her sleeve. Fast. Controlled. They were delivered, she insisted. He is ignoring them. The first officer glanced at her. Not long, but long enough. Something silent passed between them. Not agreement. Not exactly. More like a question that had not been answered yet. I slipped my wallet back into my pocket. Slow. Measured. No one stopped me. No one told me to. That mattered. Linda took another step forward. Too close now. This is exactly the kind of behavior that drags property values down, she said, her voice lower, tighter. People like him think rules are optional. The words hung there. Heavy. Deliberate. The second officer's jaw shifted. Not a reaction. Not fully. But not nothing either. The first officer exhaled through his nose, eyes flicking once more to my face, then back to Linda. That hesitation again. Growing. Linda saw it this time. I could tell. Her smile thinned. The confidence did not disappear, but it cracked, just enough to show something underneath. Something uncertain. The kind that only shows up when a plan starts slipping. I reached into my pocket again, this time for my phone. The screen lit up in my hand. Bright against the afternoon sun. No one told me to stop. Not yet. Linda's eyes dropped to it, then snapped back to my face. And for the first time, she looked like she might have missed something important. The screen lit up in my hand, bright enough to pull every eye toward it without a single word. I did not rush. I did not explain. I just stood there, thumb hovering for a second longer than necessary. That pause mattered. The first officer noticed. His shoulders shifted, subtle but real. The second officer slowed his steps, stopping just short of the edge of the driveway. Even the air felt like it was waiting. Linda let out a small laugh. Too quick. Too sharp. Calling your lawyer? She said, tilting her head again. That is a little late for that. Her voice carried, but it did not land the same way anymore. Something underneath it had started to slip. I glanced at her, then back at the phone. The glass reflected the sky for a moment. Clear. Bright. Calm. Nothing about this situation matched that. I tapped once. The call rang. Not loud. Just enough to be heard in the quiet that had settled over everything. One ring. Two. No one spoke. Gravel shifted somewhere down the street. A car door closed in the distance. Small sounds, but they carried. Linda crossed her arms tighter. Her fingers tapped again, faster now. She was watching my face, not the phone, trying to read something that was not there. Sir, the first officer said, his tone careful now, we need to resolve this situation before it escalates. Escalates. That word hung there. Heavy. Out of place. I nodded once, still holding the phone to my ear. The line clicked. Someone picked up. I did not smile. I did not change my posture. But something shifted. Quiet. Immediate. Daniel, I said, voice steady, like this was any other call on any other day. A pause on the other end. Just long enough to be noticed. The first officer's head turned slightly. Linda's tapping stopped. Completely. Yes, I continued, eyes still on her. I am standing in my driveway. With 2 officers. And your wife. The word hung there. Wife. Linda's expression froze. Not fully. Just enough to break the rhythm she had been holding on to. The second officer glanced at the first. Quick. Silent. But it happened. That mattered. No. I said, listening now. I have not received anything. Not a single notice. Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear something faint through the phone. Not words. Movement. Papers maybe. Or a chair shifting too fast. Linda took a step back. Small. Almost unnoticeable. But she moved. That was new. You might want to check that, I added, still calm. Still even. The first officer cleared his throat softly. Not to interrupt. Just reacting. The tension had changed shape. It was no longer pointed at me. It was spreading. Uncertain. Unbalanced. Linda's eyes flicked to the officers, then back to me. For the first time, she looked like she was calculating instead of performing. Who are you talking to? She asked, voice lower now. Controlled, but not as confident. I did not answer her. I did not need to. Daniel, I said again, slower this time. I think we need to have a conversation. Right now. The words landed differently. Not louder. Not harsher. Just heavier. The kind of weight that does not need volume. The first officer shifted his stance again. This time he looked directly at me. Not past me. Not through me. At me. Recognition was not fully there yet. But it was close. Close enough to change how he stood. Linda saw it. I could tell. Her shoulders tightened. Her smile was gone now. Completely gone. The neighborhood stayed silent. No doors opened. No voices called out. Just that same watching stillness. But it felt different. Like something had turned. Like a line had been crossed, and no one was sure what came next. I listened for a few seconds more, then nodded once, even though he could not see it. Good, I said quietly. I will wait. I lowered the phone just slightly, not ending the call. Not yet. The screen glowed between us. And for the first time since the siren stopped, Linda Whitmore looked unsure about what she had just started. The phone stayed warm against my ear, a faint hum leaking through the speaker like distant static. I did not say anything else. I let the silence do the work. Across from me, Linda shifted her weight again, heels scraping lightly against the concrete this time. Not as controlled as before. Not as precise. That small sound echoed louder than it should have. The first officer glanced at her, then back at me. His posture had changed. Not defensive. Not relaxed. Just recalibrating. Sir, he said, slower now. Who exactly are you speaking with? I did not answer right away. I kept my eyes on Linda. Her arms were still crossed, but tighter now. Shoulders slightly raised. Like she was bracing for something she could not yet see. Daniel Whitmore, I said finally. The name landed flat. But the effect was not. The second officer's head turned fully this time. Not subtle anymore. Direct. Whitmore, he repeated under his breath, almost like he was confirming something in his own memory. Linda's lips parted, just slightly. The confidence in her eyes flickered again. Not gone, but unstable. That is my husband, she said quickly, stepping forward half a step, like reclaiming ground. I do not see how that is relevant. The word relevant hung there, thin and forced. I nodded once slow, still holding the phone, still listening to the quiet movement on the other end. Papers again. Maybe a drawer opening. Something being pulled up too fast. It is relevant, I said, voice steady. Because he reports to me. The silence that followed felt different. Heavier. The kind that presses in from all sides. The first officer blinked once. Then again. His grip on his pen loosened slightly. Linda did not move. Not at first. Her face stayed still, like she was waiting for the punchline. It did not come. Excuse me, she said. The words came out softer than before. Not sharp. Not commanding. Just uncertain. I shifted the phone just enough to hear. More clearly. Yes, I said into it, ignoring her for the moment. I will need you to confirm his position. Out loud. A pause. Then a voice, faint but clear enough through the speaker. I did not put it on speaker. I did not need to. The tone alone was enough. Urgent. Controlled. Careful. Senior Operations Manager. I repeated, glancing at the officers. Under my division. The first officer straightened. Not fully, but enough to show he understood something had just changed. The second officer's expression tightened. Not hostile. Just alert now. Focused in a different direction. Linda shook her head once, quick. No, she said, almost to herself. No, that is not what this is about. Her voice did not carry this time. It stayed close to her, like she was trying to contain it. I finally lowered the phone slightly, but I did not end the call. The screen still glowed. A steady, quiet presence between us. This is exactly what it is about, I said. No raised voice. No edge. Just a statement. Linda took another step back. This time it was obvious. The distance between us widened by a foot, maybe two. It looked small. It was not. The first officer cleared his throat again, this time more deliberate. Ma'am, he said, turning toward her, we may need to reassess the situation. Reassess. That word landed harder than anything else so far. Linda's eyes snapped to him, then back to me, then to the phone in my hand. Her breathing had changed. Shorter, faster, controlled, but barely. The neighborhood stayed silent. Watching. Always watching. But now it felt like they were seeing something new. Something they had not expected. I lifted the phone back to my ear. Daniel, I said quietly, we are not done yet. The voice on the other end dropped lower, tighter, like every word now had weight behind it. I did not need to hear everything to understand what was happening. The tone said enough. Fast adjustments. Quiet panic. Someone pulling up records that should have already been clear. I kept my gaze on Linda. She was no longer looking at the officers. She was watching me now. Not with authority. Not with control. With calculation. The kind that comes when a plan starts unraveling faster than expected. This is a misunderstanding, she said, but the words came out. Thinner than before. Less certain. The first officer did not respond right away. He glanced toward the second officer, then back to me. That hesitation had turned into something else. Caution. Ma'am, he said carefully. You mentioned multiple notices. Do you have copies with you? Linda froze for a fraction of a second. It was quick, but it was there. Then she reached for her clipboard. Papers shuffled. Too fast. Edges bent slightly under her grip. She flipped through them like she was searching for something she expected to find. Something that was not there. That small delay stretched. The kind that gets noticed. The second officer crossed his arms loosely, watching her now instead of me. That shift mattered more than anything said out loud. They were sent electronically, she said, not looking up. Through the HOA system. Her voice was steady again, but forced. Like she was rebuilding it piece by piece. I raised the phone back to my ear. Daniel, I said quietly. I need you to check the system logs. Right now. A pause. Then a sharper sound from the other end. Keys. Fast typing. The kind that does not happen unless something is wrong. Linda heard it too. Her fingers stopped moving. The papers in her hand stayed half-turned, frozen in place. The neighborhood remained silent, but it felt different now. Not just watching. Listening. Trying to catch something they could not quite hear. Sir, the first officer said, shifting his stance again. If there is no documented notice, this may not be enforceable. Not enforceable. The words landed heavy. Linda's head snapped up. That is not correct, she said quickly. We have authority under the bylaws. Authority. She leaned on that word hard, like it was the only thing holding her ground in place. I watched her for a second longer, then spoke into the phone again. Read it, I said. No explanation. No context. Just two words. Another pause. Longer this time. Then a voice, clearer now, controlled but strained. I listened. Did not interrupt. Did not react. But I could feel the shift as each second passed. The officers could too. The air tightened again, but in a different direction. Away from me. Toward her. I lowered the phone slightly. Not enough to end the call. Just enough to let the silence stretch between us. There are no notices, I said simply. Linda shook her head again, slower this time. That is not possible, she said. But it sounded like she was trying to convince herself. The clipboard lowered an inch. Then another. Her grip loosened. The papers inside slid slightly out of alignment. Small details. But they told the story. The first officer exhaled, longer this time. Decision forming. Ma'am, he said, voice firmer now. We need to verify documentation before taking further action. Further action. That phrase changed everything. Linda's shoulders dropped just a fraction. Not defeat. Not yet. But the edge was gone. She looked at me again. Really looked this time. Not as a problem. Not as a violation. As something she had not accounted for. Something outside her control. I lifted the phone back to my ear. The voice on the other end had gone quiet again. Waiting. Just like everyone else. Daniel, I said, calm as ever. Tell me who approved those notices." The line went quiet for a beat too long, and that silence said more than any answer could have. I did not repeat the question. I let it sit there, heavy and waiting. Across from me, Linda's fingers tightened around the edge of her clipboard again, but she did not flip the pages this time. She just held it, like it might anchor her to something stable. It did not. "Daniel," I said, softer now, but sharper. A breath came through the speaker. Then another. Controlled, but not steady. "Those notices," he started, then stopped. That hesitation landed harder than anything else so far. The first officer shifted his weight fully toward Linda now. Not halfway, not uncertain. Fully. The second officer mirrored him without a word. That alignment was not subtle. Linda saw it. Her shoulders stiffened again, but this time it looked forced, like she was holding posture instead of owning it. "They were processed through the system," she said quickly, stepping in before the phone could speak again. "Standard procedure." I followed protocol. Protocol. She leaned on that word like it could carry her across the gap opening under her feet. I watched her for a second. Then I brought the phone closer again. "Daniel," I said, "who approved them?" This time, there was no pause. Just a low exhale. Then, quiet and clear, "There is no approval record." The words were not loud, but they cut clean. The first officer's pen lowered completely. No notes now, just observation. The second officer's jaw set slightly, eyes narrowing as he looked at Linda, not me. That shift was complete. Linda blinked. Once. Then again. Slower. Like her body was catching up to something her mind did not want to accept. "That is not possible," she said again, but it came out weaker this time. Not a statement. A question she did not want answered. The clipboard dipped another inch. Papers inside slid again, edges misaligned, corners bending. Small details, but they kept stacking. I turned slightly, just enough to change the angle of the sun hitting the phone screen. The glare shifted. Bright. Sharp. Clear. "Check the sender logs," I said into the phone. Timestamp. Origin. A faint sound of keys again. Faster this time. No hesitation. No confusion. Just confirmation. Linda took a step back. Another one. Not dramatic, but real. The space between us widened again. The first officer followed that movement with his eyes. Measuring. Reassessing. The neighborhood stayed quiet, but the feeling had changed. It was no longer curiosity. It was recognition. Something was off. Something bigger than a complaint. "Sir," the first officer said, voice steady now. "If there was no official approval, this could be considered unauthorized action." Unauthorized. The word landed like a weight dropped from above. Linda's head snapped toward him. "That is not what this is," she said, but the edge was gone. Completely gone. Her voice sounded smaller now. Contained. I listened to the phone again. The voice on the other end spoke, more firmly this time. No hesitation. No gaps. I nodded once. Slow. Final. Then I lowered the phone just enough for my next words to carry. "The notices were generated from a personal login," I said. I let that sit for a second, then added, "Not the association system." The first officer's expression hardened slightly. Not anger. Not aggression. Just clarity. The second officer crossed his arms tighter now, stance locked in. Linda did not move. Not this time. She just stood there, eyes fixed on the phone in my hand like it had just rewritten the rules she had been playing by. The clipboard slipped lower in her grip, almost falling. She caught it at the last second. Too late to hide it. I raised the phone back to my ear one more time. The voice on the other end had gone silent again, waiting for direction, waiting for what came next. I did not rush. I did not raise my voice. I just spoke. "Daniel," I said, calm and precise. "We need to discuss your access privileges." The words hung in the air longer than they should have, like everything had slowed down just enough for people to realize this was no longer a neighborhood dispute. It was something else entirely. On the other end of the call, Daniel did not respond right away. That silence came back again, but this time it was heavier. Final. I could hear his breathing through the speaker. Controlled. Measured. But not steady. "Ethan," he started, voice lower now, stripped of whatever confidence he had earlier. He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. The first officer shifted his stance again, but this time he stepped slightly to the side, creating space between himself and Linda. Not obvious, but intentional. The second officer followed, just a half step behind. That distance said everything. Linda noticed. Her eyes flicked between them, then back to me. The clipboard in her hands lowered completely now, resting against her side. She was no longer presenting anything. She was holding on. "What is going on?" she asked, but the question was not directed at me anymore. It floated, unanswered. I kept my voice even. "Your login was used to generate unauthorized notices," I said into the phone. "Without approval. Without record." I paused just long enough for it to settle. "That is a compliance issue." The word compliance landed like a switch being flipped somewhere out of sight. Daniel inhaled sharply, then exhaled slower. "We can fix this," he said quickly. Too quickly. "I will correct the records. I will retract everything." Retract. The word echoed faintly in the quiet street. Linda's head turned slightly, like she had just heard something she was not supposed to. "No," I said. One word. Calm. Flat. It stopped everything. Even the air seemed to hold. The first officer glanced at me again. Not questioning now. Not uncertain. Just watching. Listening. "This is not a correction issue," I continued. "This is an access issue." I could hear typing again on the other end. Faster now. Urgent. But it sounded different. Not investigative. Reactive. Too late. Linda took a small step forward, then stopped herself. Like she realized moving closer would not help anymore. "Daniel," she called out, voice tight, almost breaking through the controlled tone she had been holding on to. "What is he talking about?" There was no answer for her. Only the faint sound of keys. Then silence again. I shifted my weight slightly, feeling the gravel press under my boots. The heat from the engine had faded now. The ticking slowed. Almost gone. The moment had cooled, but the tension had not. It had sharpened. "Effective immediately," I said into the phone. "Your access to the system is suspended pending review." The words came out clean. No hesitation. No emphasis. Just final. The first officer exhaled slowly, like he had been holding that breath longer than he realized. The second officer uncrossed his arms, posture easing just slightly. Not relaxed. Just no longer preparing for confrontation. Linda stared at me. Not angry. Not loud. Just still. Like she was trying to piece together how everything had shifted without her noticing the moment it did. The clipboard slipped from her hand this time. It hit the concrete with a flat, hollow sound. Papers spread slightly, edges catching the light. No one moved to pick them up. On the phone, Daniel finally spoke again. Quiet. Controlled. Defeated. Understood. That was it. No argument. No explanation. Just acceptance. I nodded once, even though he could not see it. Then I ended the call. The screen went dark. The silence that followed felt different. Not tense. Not waiting. Settled. The first officer cleared his throat and looked at Linda, his tone measured but firm. "Ma'am, I think we are done here." She did not respond. She just stood there, eyes fixed on the ground where her papers had fallen. For the first time since this started, she had nothing left to say. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, the fabric brushing against my fingers like nothing had happened at all. But everything had, and it was not over yet. The sound of the clipboard hitting concrete still echoed in my head a second longer than it should have, like the moment needed time to settle into reality. No one bent down to pick it up. Not even her. Linda just stood there, staring at the scattered papers like they belonged to someone else. The first officer adjusted his stance, shoulders easing, but his eyes stayed sharp. Focused. Not on me anymore. On her. That shift had locked in. "Ma'am," he said again, calmer now but firmer. "There is no basis for enforcement at this time." The words were simple, clean, but they stripped away everything she had built this situation on. Linda blinked slowly, like she was trying to process a language she did not understand. "You cannot just ignore violations," she said, but her voice did not carry beyond a few feet. It stayed small, contained. The second officer glanced down at the papers on the ground, then back at her. "There are no documented violations," he replied. Not harsh, just factual. Final. A screen door creaked open somewhere down the street. Then another. Neighbors stepped out now. Slowly, careful not to make it obvious. But they were watching. Really watching this time. Not guessing. Not assuming. Seeing it unfold. Linda noticed them. Of course she did. Her posture straightened for a moment, like she was trying to recover something that had already slipped too far away. But it did not come back. Not fully. I stayed where I was. Hands relaxed at my sides. Breathing steady. The heat had softened. The engine behind me was quiet now. No ticking. No movement. Just stillness. The first officer turned slightly toward me. "Sir," You are free to go about your business, he said. His tone had changed again. Respectful now. Measured in a different way. I nodded once. That was all it needed. Linda let out a short breath. Not quite a sigh. Not quite control. Something in between. This is not over, she said, but the words lacked weight. They did not land. They drifted. The second officer looked at her, then at the ground again. Ma'am, I would recommend reviewing your procedures before taking further action, he said. Not a warning. Not a threat. Just advice. The kind people give when the outcome is already clear. Linda did not respond. Her eyes flicked to me again. Searching. Not for answers. For something to hold on to. Something to push back against. But there was nothing there. I did not give her anything. No reaction. No expression. Just silence. The neighbors shifted closer now. Not crowding. Just enough to hear better. To see more clearly. The story had changed, and they knew it. The first officer gave a small nod toward his partner. They turned back. Toward their cruisers. No urgency. No tension. Just routine again. Doors opened. Radios crackled softly. The world resetting around a moment that had already passed its peak. Linda finally bent down, slow and stiff, gathering the papers from the ground. The edges were bent now. Creased. Out of order. She stacked them anyway. Tried to smooth them with her palm. It did not fix anything. She knew that. I could tell. She stood back up, but not fully straight. Not like before. The posture was different now. Carried weight. Not authority. The first cruiser engine started. Low rumble. Familiar. Ordinary. The second followed a second later. Linda stepped back onto her walkway without looking at me again. Not this time. She did not point. She did not speak. She just moved. Quiet. Controlled. But smaller somehow. The neighbors watched her go. No one said a word. I turned slightly, glancing at my garage. The door was still open. Tools where I left them. Nothing out of place. Nothing damaged. Just the same space I had been standing in before all of this started. Except now it felt different. Clearer. Like something had been exposed and could not be hidden again. I walked a few steps toward it, then stopped. Just for a second. Because something in the air told me this moment was not finished yet. I stood there for a moment longer than necessary, just listening to the engines fade as the cruisers rolled down the street and disappeared around the corner. The sound dropped off quickly. Too quickly. Like it had never belonged there in the first place. The neighborhood did not return to normal right away. Doors stayed open. People lingered on porches. Conversations started in low voices, careful and controlled, but impossible to hide. The story was already spreading. I could feel it without hearing a single word. I turned back toward my garage and took a few slow steps inside. The concrete floor was cool under my boots. The smell of oil and metal wrapped around me again. Familiar. Steady. Real. Tools sat exactly where I left them. Wrench on the bench. Rag folded near the edge. Nothing had changed here, but everything outside had. I reached for the rag and wiped my hands again, slower this time. The grease smeared, then faded. Not gone. Just less visible. Like most things. A car door shut. Across the street. Then another. Movement picked up again. Not chaos. Just adjustment. People returning to something that felt normal, even if it was not the same as before. I stepped back out into the driveway. The sunlight hit different now. Sharper. Clearer. Linda's walkway was empty. Her front door closed. Curtains drawn halfway. Not hiding, but not open either. That hesitation told its own story. A few neighbors nodded as I looked their way. Small gestures. Quick. Not overly friendly. But different. The distance that had been there before was gone. Or at least cracked. I nodded back once. Nothing more. No need for conversation. Not yet. The street settled into a quiet rhythm again. Wind moving lightly through trees. A distant lawn mower starting up somewhere down the block. Ordinary sounds. But they felt earned now. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen lit up instantly. A message waiting. No surprise there. I opened it. One line. Short. Direct. Access revoked. Review initiated. I stared at it for a second. Then locked the screen. Slid the phone back into my pocket. That part was done. Clean. Final. No noise. No spectacle. Just a system correcting itself. The way it was supposed to. I glanced once more toward Linda's house. No movement. No sound. Just stillness behind drawn curtains. Whatever conversation was happening in there, it was not mine to hear. Not anymore. The weight of it had shifted. Completely. I walked back into the garage and reached for the wrench. The metal felt solid in my hand. Balanced. Predictable. I set it down again without using it. Just feeling the weight was enough. Outside, the street kept moving. Slowly. Naturally. Like nothing had happened. But that was not true. Everyone had seen it. Everyone had felt it. And that kind of moment does not disappear. It settles. It lingers. It changes how people look at things. How they speak. How they decide what matters. I leaned lightly against the edge of the workbench and looked out one more time. No sirens. No shouting. No pointing fingers. Just quiet. The kind that comes after something has been set straight. And stays that way.